My mother stood in front of 30 relatives, tapped a champagne glass, and announced I owed my sister $93,000, or I was dead to this family. I was holding a paper plate with a piece of chicken on it when my mother tapped the side of a champagne flute with her dessert spoon. The sound cut through 30 conversations at once. Silverware stilled. Someone stopped mid-laugh, and my mother turned slowly and with great intention and looked directly at me. "Emily," she said, in the sweet voice she used when she wanted something, "we'd like to talk about your contribution." I looked down at my plate. The chicken was getting cold. I thought she was going to ask me to help clear tables, or maybe lead a toast. It was my sister Natalie's engagement party. We were in my parents' dining room, chairs pressed so tight you could feel the body heat of strangers. 30 relatives, give or take, cousins I hadn't seen in 6 years, my father's sister from Phoenix, my mother's 2 best friends from church, who were not technically relatives but had been coming to family events since I was 9, and thus occupied the same social territory. My mother smiled wider. "Your contribution to Natalie's wedding will be $93,000. I laughed. It just came out of me, this short, involuntary sound, because it had to be a joke. Nobody does that. Nobody stands up at an engagement party and assigns a dollar amount to someone's face in front of their entire extended family. Nobody else laughed. My father pushed back his chair and stood, not to protest. He stood the way men stand when they're making a toast. Slow, deliberate, sure of the room. "Every person at this table has discussed this," he said. "Every person agrees. You owe her this." My fork slipped. I heard it hit the floor, and I didn't move to pick it up. Across the room, past a flower arrangement I now understood had probably been charged to someone's credit card with my future in mind, my sister Natalie raised both hands to cover her mouth. Her eyes were wet, but her eyes were always wet at exactly the right moments, and when I looked carefully, I could see that her fingers were spread just wide enough to let the smile through. My mother leaned across the table, not whispering, performing a whisper, loud enough for the 6 people nearest us to catch every word. "Pay for your sister's wedding," she said, "or you are dead to this family." The room went into that particular quiet that only happens when everyone wants to watch something happen, but doesn't want to be seen wanting it. Held breath, forks frozen. My aunt from Phoenix studying her napkin like it had suddenly become very interesting. That moment nearly broke me, but it wasn't the moment that actually did it. What broke me was what my mother said next. She reached out and touched the back of my hand. Her fingers were dry and cold. "After everything we sacrificed by keeping you," she said softly, "this is the least you can do. Keeping me, not raising me, not loving me, keeping me." Like I was something they had decided to hold on to. Like there had been a deliberation and a close vote, and generosity had narrowly won. I put both palms on the table. I told them I needed air. My mother grabbed my sleeve. The fabric pulled and I felt the shoulder seam tighten. "Walk out that door," she said, no longer performing a whisper, "and don't come crawling back." "I'm not crawling anywhere," I said, and I walked out. Here is what you need to understand about where I come from, and why that moment in the dining room did not arrive out of nowhere. I was born in March of 1990 in Cincinnati, Ohio. My parents, Linda and Robert Holloway, were 32 and 35 at the time. My sister Natalie came 3 years later, in 1993. By every external measure, we grew up in the same house. We ate at the same table. We went to the same school district. We had the same last name. But I understood early that we did not live in the same family. I don't mean this as a dramatic claim. I mean it as a practical observation I made somewhere around age 7, when I realized that when the family was going somewhere, the lake, a birthday party, my grandmother's house, Natalie's shoes were always laid out by the door in the morning, and mine were wherever I'd kicked them off the night before. It was a small thing, but small things are the curriculum of childhood. You learn the rules before you learn the words for them. My parents never called it favoritism. They called it recognizing potential. Natalie was talented, they said. Natalie was sensitive. Natalie responded to encouragement in a way that I simply did not need in the same quantity. They had worked out a whole philosophy around it, which meant they had spent real time rationalizing it, which is something people do not do unless they know on some level that the thing they're rationalizing is wrong. Natalie was enrolled in pageant coaching at age 10. $38 per 1-hour session, twice a week, plus entry fees that ranged from $150 to $400 per competition. I know these numbers because I found the receipts later, in a drawer in my father's office where he kept household records. I was looking for a stapler. My mother drove Natalie to every session. I was 11 at the time. I walked home from school. I want to be precise here. I don't say this to generate sympathy. Walking home from school is not abuse. What it represented was the early installation of a dynamic that would govern the next 20 years of my life. Natalie's needs were finite and real. Mine were flexible and deferrable. It was the water we swam in. It took me a very long time to notice I was wet. The specific incident I keep returning to, the one that should have told me everything, happened at Natalie's 11th birthday party, May of 2004. My parents rented the backyard of our neighbor's larger house because our yard wasn't big enough. My mother ordered a custom cake from a bakery downtown, $47. I know because I saw the receipt and thought, even at 13, that was a lot of money for a cake. I had been assigned jobs: blow up balloons, set up the folding chairs, collect the paper plates into trash bags at the end of the party. I did all of it. There's a photograph my grandmother took that day, I found it later, where Natalie is on my father's shoulders in the center of the backyard, both arms raised, everyone clapping, and in the bottom right corner of the frame, barely visible, is a 12-year-old 12-year-old version of me, dragging a trash bag that was bigger than my torso. My grandmother wrote on the back of that photo, in her slow and deliberate handwriting, "Emily cleaned the whole party." Linda said Natalie deserved to feel special. She was documenting it. Even then, my grandmother was documenting it. Her name was Ruth Holloway, my father's mother, though she had always treated me with a warmth that my father himself rarely managed. She was 71 at the time of Natalie's engagement party. She had died the previous spring, which is a detail that matters enormously to everything that came after. The drive home from the engagement party took 22 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on my dashboard for the entire drive, not because I was tracking time, but because I needed something to look at that wasn't the road. My phone was buzzing in the cup holder. Mom, Dad, Natalie. Unknown number. Mom again. I got home and sat in the car in the dark for a few minutes. Then I went inside and sat on the floor of my hallway with my coat still on. The tile was cold through my jeans. I wasn't crying. I was doing that thing that happens before crying, when your body is deciding whether to bother. That was when I saw the box. It was on the bottom shelf of my built-in bookcase. Gray metal, about the size of a shoebox, with a keyed lock. I had moved it to 3 apartments over 8 years without ever opening it, because I had promised myself I would open it only when I needed to. My grandmother had pressed the key into my hand at her kitchen table when I was 16. It was the winter after Natalie's 14th birthday, at which Natalie had received a pearl necklace from our grandmother, and I had received a 40-minute conversation about the importance of academic discipline. Not a gift, a lecture. My grandmother had walked me to her kitchen while everyone else was in the living room. She put a small silver key on the table between us. "There are things in that box," she said. "I have been keeping them for years. One day you will need to understand what really happened." She pushed the key toward me. "Don't open it until then." I had been 16 and proud. I had put the key in my wallet and told myself I would never need it, that I was fine, that I was beyond all of it. On the floor of my hallway in November of 2023, I was 33 years old and I needed it. I unlocked the box. Inside, envelopes, arranged chronologically by date in my grandmother's handwriting, a small stack of photographs, several bank statements, paper clipped together, and at the very bottom, a folded note sealed with a strip of tape. I started with the photographs. The first was the birthday party photo. I had not seen it since I was 12. Looking at it at 33 was a different experience. The girl in the corner with the trash bag looked tired, not sad in the theatrical sense, just tired in the efficient, competent way of someone who has been asked to do too many things for too long. I turned it over. Emily cleaned the whole party. Linda said Natalie deserved to feel special. The second photograph was from a Christmas, roughly 2001. Natalie was opening a large box. In the background, I was holding a small flat package, the kind that usually contains socks or a gift card. The expressions on my parents' faces were pointed entirely toward Natalie. The third was from my high school graduation. My parents were on either side of me, all of us squinting into the sun. What I noticed, looking at it now, was that my father's hand was on my shoulder, but his body was turned slightly away, as if he had already begun leaving the moment before it ended. Then I opened the bank statements. The account was in my name, Emily Christine Holloway. The account number was routed through a bank I did not recognize, Tri-State Credit Union, a small regional institution that had since been absorbed into a larger chain. My grandmother had opened it on the occasion of my birth. I had not known it existed. The statement I was holding covered January 2006 through December 2015. 9 years of deposits, all from my grandmother, ranging from $200 to $100 per quarter. The total balance at the end of 2015, when my grandmother apparently stopped making deposits, was $38,840. Then the withdrawals started. Each withdrawal had a handwritten annotation beside the transaction number. The handwriting was my father's, the same blocky print he used on grocery lists and Christmas cards, and apparently on documentation of where he was sending his daughter's college savings. September 2015, $4,200. Natalie, car. March 2016, $8,500. Natalie, pageant nationals plus coaching package. November 2016, $3,100. Natalie, wardrobe. August 2017, $7,700. Natalie, engagement fund seed. June 2018, $9,200. Natalie, aptitude deposit and first to last. January 2020, $6,140. Balance this account. Remainder to household. The account was empty by February of 2020. I sat on the floor of my hallway for a long time holding those documents. $38,840. My grandmother had spent 15 years building something for me. My father had spent 5 years taking it apart and giving it to my sister in pieces, tagged with her name like it was nothing, like it had always been hers. I understood now what my mother had meant at the party. After everything we sacrificed by keeping you, they had not sacrificed anything for me. They had sacrificed something that belonged to me in order to fund Natalie's life, and then stood in front of 30 relatives and told me I owed her more. Then I unfolded the note at the bottom of the box, my grandmother's handwriting, slow and deliberate as always. It read, "Emily, if you are reading this, they have finally asked too much. I am sorry I did not do more when I had the time to do it. What has happened in this family has never been favoritism. Favoritism is buying one child nicer Christmas gifts. What happened here was something else. A decision made early and protected carefully. That one child's life mattered in ways the others did not. I tried to correct it with what I had. I could not correct all of it. There is something else you may not know. Your grandfather and I had a property that was meant to be divided equally between your father and your Aunt Margaret. When your grandfather died, the estate went through probate, and I watched what happened to that property. I want you to speak to an attorney. Margaret can tell you more. Don't let them turn your kindness into a contract. Grandma Ruth. I read it 4 times. My phone buzzed on the floor beside me. Natalie. Mom is crying. Just say yes and we'll move on. Not, are you okay? Not, I'm sorry that happened. Just say yes, as if the question were simple. As if I were a switch that needed to be flipped back to the right position. I set the phone face down and didn't touch it again until morning. By 7 a.m., I had 47 missed calls. My father had left 3 voicemails. The last one ended at volume, his voice tight with something between fury and disbelief. Apologize to your mother. Tell Natalie you're paying. We do not negotiate with disrespect. He said it like he was reading a company policy. Official. Final. Already decided. I played it twice. I needed to be sure I understood what I was hearing. Not a father asking his daughter to reconsider. A man informing someone beneath him that compliance was expected. I called my Aunt Margaret the next morning. She answered on the second ring. I've been waiting, she said, which was not the response I'd expected. I wondered how long it would take. I drove back to my parents' house that evening. Not to surrender. Not to negotiate. I needed to see their faces when I stopped performing the version of myself they had built the whole architecture around. When I walked in, Natalie's wedding mood board was on the television, literally projected on the TV screen, cycling through Pinterest images. A vineyard ceremony in the Napa Valley. White florals, ceiling high, a 5-tier cake with gold detailing, a tablecloth that probably cost more per yard than my first car payment. $93,000 in curated images. Natalie crossed the room and hugged me without asking. I knew you'd come back, she said into my shoulder. I knew you wouldn't do this to me. I stepped back. I didn't do anything to you, Natalie. She blinked. Her chin was already trembling. Please don't ruin this for me. This is the most important thing in my life. You let Mom and Dad demand $93,000 from me in front of our entire family, I said. You ruined it when you let that happen. Quick pause from the story. If you enjoy these stories, consider taking a listen to our Spotify show linked in the description for early access to new stories in better audio quality. Now back to the video. The room went very still. My mother was in the doorway to the kitchen. My father was at the head of the table, where he had always sat, where he had sat when he'd written Natalie's name next to each withdrawal from an account he had no legal right to touch. Natalie's tears arrived on schedule. She had a particular gift for it. The eyes that filled from the bottom up, the chin that trembled in precise, readable increments. I had watched it work on every adult in my life for 30 years. Teachers, coaches, grandparents, every aunt at every holiday table. Sit down, my father said, pointing at the table. I didn't move. Something shifted in his face when I didn't sit. He was accustomed to the point working. The point had always worked. It was a simple system. He pointed, I moved. He spoke, I adjusted. The whole relationship had operated on the assumption of my compliance, and in this moment, standing still, I was breaking the only rule that had ever really mattered. We need to have a conversation, he said, recalibrating. Then talk, I said. I'm listening. My mother moved from the doorway into the room. She reached for the back of a chair. I don't feel well, she said. Her voice was thin. Her eyes were closing. She was swaying. If you're sick, I'll call an ambulance, I said. Her eyes opened. There's no need for that, my father said sharply. Then she's fine, I said. My mother straightened up. She had been adjusting her bracelet with the hand she thought I couldn't see. My father turned to the room, to Natalie, to my mother, as if assembling a tribunal. Emily has benefited from this family her entire life. She has been supported and loved and given opportunity. Now, when her sister has one moment, one day, she wants to position herself as the victim. I thought about the bank statements in my coat pocket. I had printed them that afternoon. 14 pages. I could feel them against my ribs. I didn't take them out. Not yet. This wasn't the moment for documents. Documents came later. I'm not positioning myself as anything, I said. I'm telling you that I'm not paying. Not $1, not one deposit. Not for a vineyard wedding or any other kind. I am done being the financial backup for this family. My mother's voice dropped. Then you're choosing to leave us. No, I said. I'm choosing to leave the job you gave me. The job of paying for things you decided Natalie deserved. I'm not doing it anymore. My father stood. He had been sitting and now he stood, which was meant to change the weight of the moment. Walk out of here tonight, he said, and you are finished with this family. Do you understand what that means? You lose all of us. Forever. I picked up my coat from the back of the chair. That sounds less like a threat, I said, than you think it does. Natalie's voice came from behind me, higher and faster than I'd ever heard it. You'll come back when you realize that nobody else in the world is going to love you the way we do. You'll be alone and you'll come back. I stopped at the door. I turned, and I said the truest thing I have ever said in that house. That is exactly what I'm afraid of. Then I walked out while the room behind me erupted in 3 directions at once. The next morning, I sat across a conference table from a woman named Vivian Shaw. She was a family law and estate attorney. My Aunt Margaret had given me her name the previous night when we had talked for 2 hours on the phone about things I had not known and should have been told years ago. Vivian's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown. Her desk was very clean and she made no effort at warmth, which I found comforting. She had the particular stillness of someone who has watched many families destroy each other over money and has learned not to be surprised by any version of it. I set the bank statements on the table between us. She looked at them without touching them for a moment, the way someone looks at something they already expected to see. Then she put on reading glasses and picked up the first page. I watched her eyes move across the withdrawal column, the annotations, the handwriting. "These are from an account in your name," she said. "Yes." "And these withdrawals, your father initialed them? His handwriting?" "Yes." She set the pages down. "Emily, depending on how this account was structured, whether it was a custodial account with a sunset age, a UTMA, a trust, this may not be emotional manipulation. This may be theft." She said the word plainly, without drama, the way she might say weather or schedule. It depends on the legal structure, but the notation alone is significant. I told her what my grandmother's note had said, about the estate, about the lake house, about her instruction to speak to Aunt Margaret. Vivian's pen stopped moving. "I met your grandmother once," she said, "about 4 years ago. She came to me with a concern. She was worried that one of her children, she didn't name which, would apply pressure to the wrong grandchild, to get them to sign away or relinquish an inheritance before they understood what it was, the wrong grandchild. I referred her to an estate attorney at the time," Vivian continued. "I'm not certain what came of it, but if your grandmother had an estate, property, a trust, assets in any form, and your mother administered it, and you were a named beneficiary, and you signed anything, or were pressured to waive anything, or simply were never told about it," she let that sentence trail into the space between us. "We need to find out what happened to the lake house," I said. Vivian's pen lifted from the page. She looked at me for the first time with something that wasn't purely professional. "Yes," she said. "We do." The next 3 weeks were the most procedurally demanding of my life. Vivian filed a records request with the county where my grandmother had owned the lake house, a property in rural southern Ohio, on a small lake I had visited exactly 3 times as a child. It was a wood frame house on a half-acre lot. Nothing grand. But the land had been reassessed in 2019 and was worth, by that point, somewhere between $280,000 and $310,000. Vivian also contacted Tri-State Credit Union, or what remained of it after its acquisition, and formally requested account history documentation going back to 1990. The account my grandmother had opened at my birth was technically a Uniform Transfers to Minors Act account, UTMA, which meant legal control transferred to me automatically on my 21st birthday in March of 2011. My father had made the last withdrawal in January of 2020. 9 years after control of the account had legally belonged to me alone. My Aunt Margaret had known. She had known since 2017, when she had questioned my father about the account and been told it was nearly empty, a savings account drained years earlier to cover family expenses. My father had produced documentation showing that, but the documentation, Margaret had always felt, did not match the amounts she remembered. She had not pressed further. She had not known then what I found in the gray box. What emerged over those 3 weeks was not a revelation so much as a confirmation, the slow assembly of a picture that had always been there in pieces, waiting for someone to lay them flat in the same room. My grandmother's lake house had been left to both my father and Aunt Margaret in equal shares in her will. At the time of probate, my mother, acting as representative of the estate, had filed paperwork that resulted in the property being transferred solely to my father on the basis of a signed document, a document that Margaret said she had never seen and did not recall signing. The notarization on the document was dated November 14th, 2021. Margaret had been traveling internationally at that time and had not returned until November 29th. Vivian looked at that date for a long time. "She was out of the country," I said. "Yes," said Vivian. She did not need to say anything further. I called my father that evening, once. He didn't pick up. I did not call again. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and all 14 pages of bank statements and my grandmother's note and thought about the word keeping. After everything we sacrificed by keeping you. I had spent 33 years being grateful for something I was only now understanding was not generosity. It was leverage. I had been kept not because they loved me, but because I was useful. Because the presence of a compliant, capable, deferential older daughter was structurally valuable in a family organized around one daughter's happiness and the other's labor. I thought about the little girl in the photograph dragging a trash bag at her sister's birthday party. I thought about the walk home from school at 11. I thought about my college years, funded by student loans I had spent 8 years repaying, while $38,000 that belonged to me was redistributed to Natalie's car and pageant coaching and apartment deposit. I grieved that girl, genuinely. Not with self-pity, but with something closer to grief. The clean, quiet recognition of what had been taken and cannot be returned, and how long she had walked around not knowing she was owed anything at all. My father and mother issued a joint statement to the family in early December. I say statement because it was actually a group text sent to 31 family members, which I know because my cousin Diane forwarded it to me. It said that I had made false accusations about family finances, that I had chosen to pursue legal remedies rather than come to them directly, and that my behavior had caused my mother serious medical distress. It asked the family to reach out to Natalie with love and support during this difficult time. Natalie posted to social media about the importance of choosing your family wisely. She did not name me. She did not have to. Several relatives sided with my parents immediately. My father's brother, Uncle Terry, sent me a text that said only, "Disappointing." My mother's 2 church friends, who had been at the engagement party, sent cards to Natalie expressing their sympathy. Aunt Margaret drove 4 hours to have coffee with me in my kitchen. She sat across from me with her hands around a mug and said, "I should have done more. I knew something was wrong and I told myself it wasn't my place." That was a mistake. I'm sorry. It was the first apology I had received from anyone in my family. I did not expect how much weight it had. I had to set down my coffee cup. My cousin Diane, Aunt Margaret's youngest daughter, texted 2 weeks after her mother's visit. She had gone through her own mother's things and found letters from my grandmother referencing the account. She also found something else, a birthday card from my grandmother to Natalie, dated 2019, that said, "Natalie, I hope you know how much has been done for you and how little has been done in return. Be kind to your sister. She carries more than you know." My grandmother had written it. I do not know if Natalie read it. I do not know if it meant anything to her. Vivian filed a petition regarding the lake house in January. The process would take time. These things always do. She was not making promises. What she said was that the notarization date, combined with Aunt Margaret's documented travel records, created a foundation for a legitimate claim. The account withdrawals, depending on the court's interpretation of the UTMA structure, were also actionable. She said this calmly, over the phone, in the tone of someone describing logistics rather than outcomes. My parents made one final approach in February. My father called from an unknown number at 11 p.m. When I answered, he said, "Call this off. You're hurting your mother. You're hurting Natalie's future. This is not who we raised you to be." I thought about that sentence for a long time after we hung up. This is not who we raised you to be. What they had raised me to be, as best I could reconstruct it, was a person who absorbed cost without complaint, who cleaned the party, who walked home, who funded her sister's life from an account she didn't know she had, and then, when asked for $93,000 more, was supposed to say yes in front of 30 relatives and call it love. "I know," I said. "That's the point." And I hung up. It is July of 2024 now. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment in Columbus. I have a window that faces east, and I drink my coffee in front of it in the mornings. The legal proceedings are ongoing. Vivian is methodical. I have learned to be patient. Aunt Margaret calls every few weeks. We talk for an hour. She is 73 and still sharp, and she tells me stories about my grandmother that I did not know. The woman who drove 2 hours to attend my 7th grade science fair, who called me every birthday morning before she called anyone else, who spent 15 years building a savings account for a grandchild she watched being quietly erased, and who understood enough about what was coming to put the evidence in a locked gray box and press the key into my hand. I am not at peace in the way people mean when they use the word triumphant. I have not won anything yet, and even if I do, something real was taken from me that cannot be returned with interest. 30 years of not knowing that the walk home from school and the trash bags at the birthday party and the depleted savings account were all part of the same deliberate arrangement. 30 years of being grateful for being kept. I think about the word keeping sometimes, late at night, when I am trying to decide how I feel about all of it, and I think about what my grandmother wrote. "Sacrifice here has always meant Emily pays, and Natalie smiles. Don't let them turn your kindness into a contract." I spent a long time believing that loving people meant absorbing what they cost you without complaint, that was what it meant to be a daughter, a sister, a member of a family, that keeping your head down and doing the work and cleaning the party and walking home was a kind of virtue, a thing you did because family was worth it. What I understand now is that there is a difference between choosing to give and being quietly arranged into giving. The first is love, the second is something else, something that wears love's clothes and speaks in love's vocabulary. We sacrifice, we keep you, we love you. But at its core is not love at all. It is accounting, a ledger that only ever ran in one direction. I am not the girl in the corner of that photograph anymore. She earned her way out. I left the job they gave me, and I am learning, slowly, to live without it.